guys, good morning. Welcome to SmashweRx. We're going to go over some hip drills today. We're going to loosen up that hip capsule. Funny thing today, actually, they were just doing a bunch of year-end goal baselines today here at the Ablo, and it's some pretty cool stuff because you get to see in the next 6 months how much people change, and part of that is going to be mobility and how their ability to work past a lot of those sticking points in those joints is going to be concerned, because those things are going to limit you, remember. And so since talking about hip mobility, think about this. If your hip has a restricted range of motion, you're going to be fighting against yourself whenever you're doing anything that involves the hip. And in CrossFit, that's pretty much everything. Remember, we have that violent, explosive hip extension that allows us to drive the bar up. It allows us to kip. It allows us to do those muscle ups. It allows us to get out of the bottom of a squat. It allows us to do anything from a deadlift to a wall ball. It doesn't matter, but we need that hip extension. And even Coach Glassman said that a really, really strong hip extension is basically the basis for just about any sport. And if you have that really, really powerful hip extension, you're going to do great in a lot of sports. So why don't we unglue that hip and get it moving the way it's supposed to? Because a lot of people, what they have is they get into that squat and they're actually not using the tissue that they're supposed to be. The glute, the hamstring, the quads come in a little bit, but it's a lot of glute. That posterior chain's a big deal. And what's happening is they're recovering a lot of that motion with the lumbar spine. And you can see it in the way a lot of people squat. They hinge at that low back. So I'm going to show you, and we'll move this around so we can do a quick test. I know we've done this test before. We're going to do it again. All right, so what you're going to do is when you're sitting on a box that's about 90 degrees, and I realize you can only see my legs and my torso, but that's okay for right now. When you lean forward, so if I'm in this position, if I lean forward and this back stays the way it's supposed to, and I can come all the way forward, that's fine. If I'm going past about 120, 130 degrees, then I'm in the position I'm supposed to be in. The problem is a lot of people hit this impingement point, and then they start to recover that motion. If you see what I'm doing, they recover that motion by arching their low back because the hip flexors take over, primarily the psoas, and it starts to pull you forward into that squat position. So if you're in a squat and you can't get into that nice supported lumbar position above in that front squat, anything like that, if you can't get into any of those positions because you're starting to, instead of maintaining this, you're starting to round out that low back, you got that really soft, weak squat position. Here's a great way there's a lot of things that are involved in that lumbar flexibility, thoracic flexibility, definitely the hip flexors, the psoas, the iliacus, the rectus femoris. But right now, the hip capsule is a big one, so we're going to show you a really cool way to just blow open that hip capsule and get you a ton of range of motion. So you're going to grab a green band, and we'll put this right here, make sure you can see everything. So you can see I got a green band over there. All right. The reason I want it to be a green band is it's because it's got a lot of load to it. You can put a ton of pressure on this. We're going to get about 100, 150 pounds of tension on this band. First thing you're going to do is you're going to put your leg through here. Get it really high up in the groin. I want you to do, there's going to be 4 you're going to do. You're going to get one up on the box, and you're just going to really, really distract that. So it's pulling down and back. I'm going to feel it high in that pocket. And then you're just going to lean forward, and you're going to relax. You have to let the band take the hip into the back of the capsule. The most stable portion of that joint is when the head of the femur is in the acetabulum, in the back of the acetabulum, so the back of that socket. The closer you can get that to approximate into the posterior portion of that socket, the tighter and stronger that joint is, and the more range of motion you have. Remember, we have that roll, slide, glide versus just ratcheting and banging into that shelf at the top of the acetabulum. So you're just going to hang out here. You know the rule, 2 minutes. That's number one. Number two is get rid of the box. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to take a big, giant running stance. So I'm going to come all the way out like this as if I'm going to be taking off down the track. You don't have to lean on this. You can lean on the floor if you want, but I want you to really feel like you're going to blow that hip right out of the back of this pocket. All right, you're going to do this. Hold again for 2 minutes. Then stand up. So lock out that leg, still pulling. I mean, that's like a guitar string, but 100 pounds at least of tension on that. Get down into that. Lock out the leg, get down into the floor, grab that foot, however you want to do it. But the important part is you want to let that hip really get taken by this band. So let that kind of hang out like this. Again, how long? 2 minutes. You guys know this stuff. Come on, 2 minutes. This is awesome. And it's going to feel like your hip is just going to explode out of the back of here. That's all right. That's the way it's supposed to feel. And the last one is, all you're going to do is you're going to turn sideways. You're basically doing the same thing, except now, if you look, band is still high in the groin right here, but it's going to be pulling my hip laterally. It's gonna pull my hip out towards the right-hand side. So I'm gonna come away. So you can see I'm pulling on the rig like this. The band is right here, really high. And I'm just gonna come away like this. Let me grab the camera and I'll show you exactly what's going on. How about that? That's nice and easy, right? So I'm gonna come away, you can see what the band's doing. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rock back and forth. So the big thing about all these movements is you wanna kind of hunt around in all those positions, come out, come in. When you find, like right there, that's a spot where I can feel it really taking that hip. And it's just pulling that femur into the side, into the back. And right here, I wanna really, really get a lot of tension on that band. Come into the back, come into the front. When you're done, don't let yourself get taken out into the rig. I know, bad camera skills. You're not seeing my face, you're seeing me from here down, so I'm like the headless tissue ninja. But anyway, what's gonna happen is this is gonna loosen up that hip capsule. It's gonna give you a lot more range of motion. So when you get into that squat, and you're in the bottom of this squat, and you get those legs out, so you can get into that receiving position for everything you're doing, that hip capsule is gonna have that full range of motion. It's gonna allow for that roll, slide, glide. It's not gonna bang into the top of the acetabulum. It's not gonna sit on the edge of that cartilage ring that sits around the outside of that joint, that labrum, and it's gonna give you full range of motion. Instead of pulling those hip flexors in, the psoas and the iliacus, it's actually gonna use the hip itself for the range of motion it's intended. Remember, you're supposed to have about 120, 130 degrees. So if you come up, really easy way to look at it is if I'm coming up and I keep hitting into the shelf, and then when I do this, my back rounds out, or I have no internal or external rotation this way or this way, I should be able to take this hip and I should be able to bring it all the way to the midline of my body without peeling my pelvis off the ground. If that's not happening with you, that means you're missing a lot of that really critical range of motion, which means you need to do this stretch, which means you need to open up that hip, which means you're gonna hit PRs, you're gonna have awesome hip range of mobility, and you guys are gonna do great. Hey, I'm Trevor from SmashweRx. I'll see you guys tomorrow.